Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're setting the stage for an absolutely epic 2,000-year journey through what is, honestly, one of the most dynamic and complex histories on the entire planet, the history of India. I mean, we're talking ancient pearl-trading monarchs, legendary blind archers, and fiercely rebellious queens who literally defied empires. We're going to break down exactly how these vast empires were built, how they inevitably crumbled, and the incredibly colorful personalities behind the whole shebang. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap of the 5 monumental epochs we're about to explore. Number 1, ancient kings of the south. 2, the Mauryas to the Rajputs. 3, the mighty Mughal era. 4, the fierce Maratha resistance. And finally, number 5, defying the British Empire. Just look at the staggering scope of this timeline. It's wild. We're tracking a continuous, relentless cycle of rising and falling powers, from the Persian invasions way back around 520 BC all the way to 1858 AD, when the subcontinent fell under full British control. As you'll see in this explainer, history here is never static. It's basically a constant spinning wheel of ambition, conquest, and, well, eventual decline. Section 1. Ancient Kings of the South. Trade, Temples, and Power. So often when we learn about ancient Indian history, we get really laser-focused on northern invaders, right? People like Alexander the Great or the Persians. But while those epic land battles were raging up north, the southern coastal powers were busy building these sprawling maritime empires. A perfect example of this, the Pandya kingdom. Ruling over what's now Tamil Nadu, the Pandyas basically turned their coastal geography into a massive global trading hub. They didn't just stay local, they were crushing it in sea trade with powerful, distant empires like Rome, Greece, and China. And their secret weapon? The absolute finest pearls produced along the South Indian coast. It made them incredibly wealthy and super influential. Then we have the Chola dynasty, who ushered in a true golden age. Leaders like Rajaraja Chola I were just brilliant conquerors. I mean, they expanded their rule way out into Sri Lanka and the Maldives. But they weren't just warriors, actually. They were deeply dedicated patrons of architecture and education. They commissioned mind-blowing monumental structures like the magnificent Brihadishvara Temple at Tanjore. Plus, they fostered high arts, creating world-famous bronze statues and supporting deep religious philosophy. Now, what's really interesting here is the title, Ganga Khand. Rajendra Chola, who was the heir to the Chola Empire, pushed his conquests all the way north to the banks of the holy Ganges River. He literally collected its sacred water in golden pots and hauled it all the way back south, adopting this title, which translates to Victor of the Ganga. It perfectly highlights the immense, almost unimaginable reach of a southern empire pushing straight into the northern heartlands. Okay. Let's map out how this builds with the parallel rise of the Pallava dynasty. Between 350 BC and the eventual fall of the Cholas in the 13th century, the Pallavas were a massive force to be reckoned with. A real standout figure here is King Mahendravarman around 600 BC. He was definitely a fierce ruler, but get this, he was also a highly skilled Veena player, a poet, and the very guy who initiated the breathtakingly beautiful cave temples of Mahabalipuram. It just goes to show that these kings valued art every bit as much as military might. Section 2, Mauryas to the Rajputs, the changers and the chivalrous. Let's shift gears and focus on northern India now. We're going to look at the intense, almost larger-than-life leaders who defined this region, starting with Emperor Ashoka of the Maurya dynasty. Why? Because his personal transformation is quite possibly one of the most dramatic in recorded history. In his early days, the guy had a massive temper. He was actually so cruel, he was nicknamed Chand Ashoka, or Ashoka the Fierce. But later, he completely transformed into Ashoka the monk. He converted to Buddhism, built hospitals, and basically dedicated his entire life to propagating peace. So what on earth caused this massive shift? Well, it comes down to this number right here, 100,000. That is the staggering number of soldiers from the Kalinga army who died when Ashoka ruthlessly invaded their fertile lands. Seeing the scattered corpses, hearing the wails of mourners, and realizing he'd also lost 10,000 of his own men, it deeply traumatized him. It moved him so profoundly that he spent the rest of his 40-year reign carving messages of compassionate living right onto stone pillars across his empire. Fast forward a few centuries to the 7th and 8th centuries, and a totally new warrior class emerges in Rajasthan and central India, the Rajputs. The name literally means sons of kings. To really understand the Rajputs, you've got to grasp their intense cultural loyalty and sheer courage. This was a society where even women were trained for war. But if their king and all his men were completely annihilated in battle, Rajput women famously performed jauhar. This was a deeply tragic yet courageous ritual of mass suicide, done entirely to avoid the dishonor of being taken prisoner by invading forces. To really illustrate true Rajput chivalry and skill, just look at the almost cinematic legend of Prithviraj Chauhan. Ascending the throne at just 13 years old, he was an archer so ridiculously skilled he could hit moving targets just by listening to the sound they made. He boldly abducted his beloved Princess Senyogita right from her wedding to another man, and later, when he was captured by the invader Muhammad Ghori, Prithviraj was brutally tortured and blinded with hot iron rods. Yet, and this is wild, during an archery contest, guided only by Ghori's voice, Prithviraj shot an arrow that killed his enemy, all while completely blind. Section 3. The Mighty Mughal Era. Art, Expansion, and Ruin. Starting with Babur's victory in 1526, which was largely thanks to his superior cavalry and firearms, the Mughals completely reshaped the subcontinent. They birthed this stunning Indo-Muslim culture, giving us the Urdu language, which is this beautiful mix of Sanskrit, Persian, Turkish, and Arabic. Plus, they left an indelible mark on art and architecture. But their story is one of extreme contrasts in leadership. On one side, you have Emperor Akbar. Even though he was illiterate, he was incredibly thirsty for knowledge. He famously allowed total religious freedom and surrounded himself with brilliant scholars known as his Navratnas. On the flip side, his great-grandson, Emperor Aurangzeb, he was a ruler who enforced incredibly strict, restrictive Islamic law, destroyed temples, and heavily taxed non-Muslims, essentially reversing all of Akbar's policies of tolerance. So the crucial point is, how did this shift from tolerance to restriction actually trigger the fall of an empire that was otherwise so mighty and wealthy? I mean, Aurangzeb had expanded the empire to its absolute territorial peak. We're talking armies of 500,000 men. But as we'll see, his internal policies were basically a ticking time bomb. Here is exactly how his enemies multiplied. By enforcing the ultra-strict Fatwa-e-Alamgiri, Aurangzeb deeply alienated his own subjects. When he brutally executed the Sikh guru Tegh Bahadur for refusing to convert, it triggered a massive, unyielding Sikh rebellion. And by constantly warring, spending excessive time on military campaigns, his internal political grip weakened, which gave his generals way too much power. Eventually, even the famously loyal Rajput states of Jodhpur and Mewar joined forces to rebel against him. He literally fractured his own foundation. Section 4. The Fierce Maratha Resistance, Shivaji's Rebellion. The Marathas were basically the ultimate thorn in the Mughal Empire's side. Led by the brilliant tactician Shivaji, they proved that a highly motivated resistance could totally dismantle a massive, seemingly invincible imperial army. Shivaji wasn't just brave. The guy was incredibly cunning. Take his legendary encounter with Afzal Shah's general, Afzal Khan. Khan was sent with 40,000 men to destroy him, so Shivaji agrees to an informal, unarmed meeting at the base of the fort. But, totally anticipating treachery, Shivaji secretly wore protective chainmail beneath his clothes. When they embraced, Afzal Khan literally pulled a knife and stabbed Shivaji in the back. Thankfully, the chainmail saved him, and Shivaji immediately counterattacked, slaying the treacherous general with a hidden tiger's claw glove. Shivaji was just a master of the unexpected. Even when he was finally captured by the Mughals, he definitely didn't stay captured for long. He masterminded this completely ingenious escape plan by sneaking out of heavily guarded territory, hidden entirely inside a giant basket of fruits. No way, right? It's surprising historical anecdotes exactly like this that show why Shivaji was so deeply beloved by his people and why his legacy of justice and clever defiance is still celebrated with such grand fervor today. Section 5. Defying the British Empire. The Final Stand. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the internal conflicts between the Mughals, Marathas, and regional kingdoms were suddenly overshadowed by a massive external threat, the arriving British forces. The fight completely shifted from who gets to rule India to simply keeping it from being swallowed whole by a foreign corporate and military machine. One of the greatest early threats to the British was Tipu Sultan, known as the Tiger of Mysore. He realized that to fight the British, he needed modern tactics. After being introduced to French military training as a teenager, he heavily modernized his army. In the Second Anglo-Mysore War, he decisively defeated a British army of 7,000 men, using 18 massive iron cannons. He proactively built international alliances with France, Afghanistan, and Turkey. Ultimately, he refused to surrender, dying sword in hand right at his palace entrance during the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War. And finally, we have Rani Lakshmibai, the legendary queen of Jhansi. When her husband and young son tragically died, the British Governor-General Lord Dalhousie actually tried to exploit her grief to annex her kingdom, offering her a pension to just quietly leave her fort. But she firmly refused. Instead, she assembled a fierce army of rebels, which notably included female warriors, and openly rebelled against the British forces in 1857 to fight the annexation. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer impact she had. Listen to this quote. It isn't from one of her supporters. It's actually from British General Sir Hugh Rose, the very man who fought her. He described her as remarkable for her beauty, cleverness, and perseverance, the most dangerous of all rebel leaders. Even her greatest enemy had immense respect for her capabilities on the battlefield. She died fighting right on the front lines, cementing her legacy forever. Wow, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, tracking this relentless cycle of power across 2 millennia. From the ancient southern pearl traders expanding their global reach, to a fierce monk king carving peace into stone, all the way to rebel queens fighting tooth and nail for sovereignty. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Before we go, I want to leave you with this to ponder. History is never truly in the past. So, from ancient pearl traders to fierce rebel queens, how does the legacy, the geography, and the cultural grit of these incredibly diverse epochs continue to shape the identity of modern India today? Let that sink in. See you next time.